For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. The Committee on Local Government met earlier today to hear testimony both for and against the Uniform State Labor Standards Act. The bill would prevent cities and municipalities from setting labor standards like paid sick leave and minimum wage in favor of consistency statewide. Here's a portion of that meeting from this morning.
As you may know, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is made up of 2,300 companies across the state of Minnesota. We have large companies, and we're proud to have them. They provide thousands of jobs in our state. But the majority of our members are, in fact, small and medium-sized companies, mom-and-pop shops on Main Street, small manufacturing companies competing across the globe. The 2,300 members of the Chamber of Commerce together employ 500,000 Minnesotans. And based on extensive feedback from them and reflection on this topic, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce supports Senate File 580 because we need uniform laws across the state when it comes to workplace mandates. In contrast, if the rule book changes every time the zip code changes, Minnesota's employers would have to spend their limited time and money and resources hiring HR consultants and attorneys, building software programs to keep time in 854 different cities and 87 different counties. Minnesota's employers want to continue fulfilling their obligation to the state to provide great jobs with competitive packages of wages and benefits. But to do so, they need uniform laws in the workplace area. And that's why we support Senate File 580. Let me briefly and in conclusion speak to the important topic of local control. It is absolutely true that many areas of policy are properly left to local units of government. We could go on with examples, but just some quick ones. Property taxes, zoning, traffic, school curriculum. But in contrast, there are other areas of policy that over the decades, the legislature has decided explicitly in Minnesota statute are appropriate for uniform treatment across the state because they're areas of policy that impact everyone. And it's truly unworkable to have a patchwork. And so that's why we've seen statewide occupational licensing, statewide consumer protection law, state criminal code. And so this bill would put these narrow elements explicitly into the column of uniform standards. And my final point on local control is that, as Senator Miller described, the final portion of the bill makes explicit that cities may attach conditions as they see fit when they spend their own money. That's an important provision of the bill, and it's really important to respect the ability of cities to attach conditions as they see fit. So in conclusion, we ask for your yes vote.
The MLBA is a statewide association of family-owned small businesses, liquor stores, bars, and restaurants. These bars and restaurants are places at their best, public houses for all to gather, celebrate, relax, and create community. I'm here today to represent the many members of the MLBA in their support of Senate File 580. Without this bill, there will be significant negative impacts to small businesses throughout the state. In the 159 years the state has existed, small business owners have been able to rely on wage and labor practices to be set at the state level. This has provided certainty and uniformity that has proven to be quite reliable. We haven't had to deal with different labor rules city by city or township by township. This recent proposed break from tradition is the first step in the creation of patchwork of labor rules that potentially different levels of wages depending upon where these businesses are located. This will also increase competitive disadvantages within the hospitality marketplace. Next, some might think, what impact does this have on a bar, restaurant, or liquor store in your district? I would tell you that if the cost of goods go up because the distributor is based in a city that chooses to impose their own unique wage and labor standards, those increased costs will be passed on to the bar, restaurant, or liquor store in your city. In turn, those costs will be passed on to their customers. Minnesota is an integrated state where products are supplied and shipped from all parts of the state to retailers who are located, in some cases, in municipalities that are far away from their origin. I want to conclude where I began. The members of the MLBA are oftentimes some of the most identifiable small businesses in your communities. We value our communities. We value our employees. We just think that setting wage and labor standards city by city does not make sense. We, the MLBA, strongly support Senate File 580. Thank you.
Small, Main Street, and medium-sized retailers in particular say they will be greatly impacted by the new significant increase in their administrative duty to comply with local labor laws. In addition, with already complying with state and federal laws, Minnesota retailers will be required to devote even more resources into complying with local law, which we have already seen lacks parity among cities. The extrapolation of these inconsistent ordinances could lead to 854 different local laws across 87 counties, or potentially 87 different county local laws, all of which Minnesota's retailers, who are already operating in an internationally competitive environment, would have to comply with. And members, even if it is not 854 different local laws, imagine trying to deal with just a fraction of that. It would be extremely difficult, especially for our small Main Street and medium-sized retailers with less sophisticated operations. Retailers across Minnesota appreciate consistent, predictable, and uniform state labor standards as they allow our retailers to do what they do best: invest in their communities, invest in their employees, and sell great products at competitive prices to consumers, as opposed to losing growth opportunities to another layer of local compliance.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, we're supportive of this legislation because we believe a patchwork of local ordinances that define employment benefits and employment conditions across the state is inherently unworkable for the construction industry, and I'll cover 3 quick points. First, the construction workforce. The construction workforce is inherently transient and mobile. The craft workers employed in construction will regularly move from project to project and employer to employer across differing geographic areas of the state. It's not uncommon for a construction worker to have worked on multiple jobs for multiple employers in just one construction season. Tracking the variable hours worked and differing benefit terms and conditions across political jurisdictions, we believe, will be burdensome, costly, and unworkable. Secondly, collectively bargained benefits. The union construction model has wage and benefit packages that are collectively bargained between employers and the trade's representatives. And in construction contracts, we already have an accommodation for sick leave and personal time off, and that is often referred to as a vacation savings fund. That fund is a mechanism that allows the worker to bank a portion of their hourly pay that can then be accessed to compensate the employee for PTO or sick time. Lastly, small businesses, as you heard, there are concerns. 90% of our members employ fewer than 20 persons. Most of those employers do not have HR professionals or benefit managers to track and accommodate a patchwork of local ordinances. We urge you to support this important piece of legislation. We believe the state must intervene in the matter to pass this law to avoid the burdensome and unnecessary compliance standards that would be placed on industries like construction, where they already meet the desired outcomes of such ordinances.
As a multi-community local and regional chamber representing more than 500 members throughout Dakota County, we fully support passage of Senate File 580. Additionally, I am here representing the Metropolitan Advocacy Coalition of Chambers as chair of their board, a group of 24 chambers of commerce throughout the Twin Cities metropolitan area with a combined membership of 10,000 businesses. Our members are employers who hire thousands of people from across the region, purchase goods and services from companies in the area, and work in collaboration to ensure our regional economy remains strong and vibrant. Businesses across the Twin Cities are both aware and concerned about the individual cities passing new regulations to govern the scheduling of employees, the amount of paid sick and safe leave time provided, and minimum wage requirements that go above state and federal guidelines. Over the past 60 days, we have been analyzing data gathered from a collective members of the MAC group through an online sample survey. Nearly 500 businesses responded to a multi-issue survey, of which 75% were small businesses. As you will see from the results, concerns about local regulations, paid sick and safe leave is not about big business. It's about every business in the Twin Cities region and the state of Minnesota.
I am a leader with Isaiah and the mother of 3 adult children who who are all college educated and living in St. Paul. I was jubilant when the St. Paul City Council voted unanimously on a sick and safe time ordinance for our city. I and many of my colleagues in Isaiah had worked long and hard with our city council and our community to make sure we could get earned sick and safe time for the 72,000 workers who currently do without, including my sons, my daughter, and my daughter-in-law. But now it appears that corporate special interests are trying to undo all the good we have done for our city and the people in our community with the introduction of this Senate File 580, which would nullify paid sick time. My children and my grandchild will suffer if this bill is allowed to move forward. 2 of my children hold down jobs here in the city where they receive no benefits, including no paid sick time. My daughter works at a restaurant here in the city and has had to go to work sick because she needs the money to pay her rent, utilities, and groceries. She can't afford to miss any hours. That is not right. Good, hardworking people should be able to stay home when they are sick or have a medical issue and not have to worry about if they will have the money to pay their bills. As a person of faith, I believe we all need to be treated with dignity and respect as we are all made in God's image and likeness. There's no sense of dignity or respect toward us as human beings when a person has to drag himself to work or send a child to school sick because they have no other recourse. That is an untenable choice. I urge this committee to vote against this bill. Vote instead for families and local communities and local public officials who can make the best decisions about the welfare of our communities and not the large corporate interests whose focus is solely profits and the bottom line. Vote for the good of all our families and our children by not letting this bill go forward.
We have a history in the state of Minnesota of valuing local control and local decision-making. This is why the city of Minneapolis joins with the League of Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, and the city of St. Paul in unified opposition to this bill. We are expected to respond to the needs of our communities, and this bill interferes with local decisions. The city of Minneapolis has had a history of supporting efforts to improve working conditions. We have formally supported statewide action to improve working conditions for years, including an increase in the state minimum wage, a state safe and sick time law, paid family and medical leave, and more. However, in Minnesota, action has not happened at the state level in many areas. There is no uniform sick leave law in the state of Minnesota. I believe this is why we saw hundreds and thousands of people engaged in discussion about sick leave benefits in the city of Minneapolis in 2016, the year that we adopted our ordinance. Our ordinance was developed after a very lengthy process engaging employers, workers, businesses, and labor groups, and many others. In Minneapolis and in St. Paul, there was unanimous approval by our policymaking bodies of these ordinances, which speaks to the effective process that was used and the great need for these working benefits. We found through our process that many employers had done a great job of offering time off to address health and medical needs, but we also found that a significant percent, 41% of Minneapolis workers don't have access to paid sick time, many in the service industry, which compounds the health impact. Also, most of these workers who are not covered by these benefits are women and people of color. One of the most powerful testimonies that I heard on the importance of our sick leave ordinance was from a school nurse who testified in one of our public hearings. And she talked about her experience with parents who drop off children who are sick or cannot come to pick up a sick child because they cannot get the time off from work. This is an experience that resonates, I think, with many of us who've gotten that call from the school nurse. In closing, we respectfully oppose Senate File 580 as it interferes in local government's ability to respond to local concerns, bypasses the views of residents on issues that impact their communities, and undermines a local government's ability to respond to needed changes expressed by constituents. We hope that you do not take away our ability to have elected representation and control at the local level.
I'm one of the pastors at Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in St. Paul. I'm also a clergy leader with Isaiah. I'm here speaking on behalf of 200 Isaiah congregations and over 150,000 Minnesotans who will lose access to sick time if this bill becomes law. Near the end of Matthew's gospel, Jesus tells a parable, and it ends this way. Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? That we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? That we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. The congregation I serve tries to take seriously this call to care for the least of these among us. That's why 2 years ago, when members of our community started sharing their stories about how difficult it is to care for their families without access to earned sick time, we got to work. We invited our city council member to a meeting in our church basement, and 75 members of the church showed up to tell their stories and support a strong sick time ordinance. We showed up at city council meetings and gave testimony. Today, 72,000 people in St. Paul are poised to begin earning sick time this summer when our ordinance goes into effect. As Senator Torres-Ray pointed out, this is the Senate Local Government Committee, and I'm here to say that the process we had in St. Paul was a triumph of local democracy. Hundreds of everyday people attended and testified at multiple city council hearings. On the night of the vote, one council member remarked that she had never seen so many citizens engaged in the political process. This bill is an attempt on the part of big corporate interests to shut down local democracy because it's at the local level that government is actually working for the people. We see what's going on here. Businesses don't want to expand worker benefits or increase wages. And with vast resources and an army of lobbyists in Washington and here in St. Paul, they usually get their way. So when local communities do what's right for our most vulnerable neighbors, it's not surprising that powerful business lobbies try to shut down local democracy too. It's not surprising, but it is reprehensible. Proponents of this bill say that preemption is about avoiding a patchwork of regulations across Minnesota. I'd like to call their bluff. If one state, one rule is really what they seek, great. Let's use St. Paul's sick time ordinance as a model for statewide legislation that protects the most vulnerable members of our communities. I respectfully call upon all of you, our elected leaders here in the Minnesota Senate, to exercise moral leadership. Stop this attack on local democracy, or if you're serious about one state, one rule, pass earned sick and safe time for all Minnesotans.
I'm a small restaurant owner employing 20. I'm not a member of the chamber, and I actually have implemented the standards that are being proposed to be repealed with positive effects for my business. I feel sad to lose my opportunity to have a voice in decisions about workplace conditions at my city level. I currently actually have a voice there. And unlike the lobbying associations in favor of this bill, I'm only located in one city jurisdiction. What other local governments do don't add a lot of complexity to my business. And small independent business owners really actually do just care about their city, their local jurisdiction, and have access at that level. Businesses that have interests spread across multiple cities and states are complaining, but notice they've chosen to be complex and they have been thriving. There has been complexity before this. Mr. Winton perhaps could share the percentage of those who do have businesses in more than one zip code. And I'm wondering why we chose January 1st, 2016. I assume there was complexity before that. I also feel sad that our legislators seem to have lost their voice. While the bill's authors have spoken, I haven't heard a lot in committee hearings. No questions, no comments, nobody standing up for it at the committee level. And maybe that's a sign of something else that's being lost. The ability to just stand up for one's constituents And that silence perhaps is, party work or it's chamber work, but it's silence. It doesn't seem so far off then, as state legislators, if the national chamber decides to set a federal standard, that you'll lose your voice as well. And that saddens me. It saddens me that we wouldn't have that voice.
Paid sick leave is a public health issue. As our population ages and the number of people most vulnerable to infections rises, helping sick workers stay at home becomes increasingly important, particularly in the more densely populated cities. We should not be enacting legislation that would prohibit local governments from enacting public health, safety, and labor policies that serve their communities. Most low-wage workers risk losing their jobs and risk losing needed income when they do not have the protections of government-mandated sick leave. Causing employees to go to work when they are contagious is poor public policy. According to an article published in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, all of the net employment growth from 2005 to 2015 occurred in the gig economy. The gig economy consists of freelancers, independent contractors, temporary and on-call workers who often do not receive full-time hours, regular work schedules, or benefits such as vacation days, sick days, health insurance, or retirement savings accounts. Many employers have found that they can avoid paying living wages and benefits to employees by limiting the hours their employees can work. This shifts some of the costs of doing business from the business and its investors to the public by relying upon a subsidy from taxpayers in the form of earned income tax credits and other forms of public assistance. This is an unfair burden to the taxpayer and the community. Some of the effects of businesses' efforts to cost shift the underpaying of employees can be seen in the high poverty rates in cities like St. Paul, where nearly 25% of the city's residents and 38% of the children in the city are living in poverty. So it becomes incumbent upon local government to establish livable and sustainable wage rates.
Ma'am, could you wrap it up then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Taxpayers should not be subsidizing the low wages paid by businesses, and our representatives should not prohibit local government from enacting and enforcing labor standards that promote good public health and safety. The Minnesota Senate should vote against Senate File 580.
Okay, ending our public testimony, I want to go to members that would like to speak on the bill, and starting with Senator Osmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Miller, could you please define to me in state statute, any state statute that prohibits any business from hiring and employing people at $15 an hour? And could you also point to any state statute that prohibits any business in Minnesota from providing sick leave assistance or sick leave benefits to their employees?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Osmick, the answer to your
Senator
question is no.
So, Mr. Chair,
Senator Osmick.
just to clarify, any business can do this on their own volition if they choose to at any time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate the conversation about business, Senator Miller, and I do know we have committees to talk about it. I believe that I personally feel very strongly that businesses need to thrive and we need to do what we need to do in order to support that. But these committees about local governments, I'm going to focus on that. So my question to you, Senator, is I think that the testimony clearly presents an option for us in terms of what we need to do to include local government in this conversation. Senator, do you have anyone out of the 833 local communities that will be impacted by this that are actually supporting your idea? That's my first question. And the second question is the issue of uniformity. I don't know what is your position on paid sick leave, but if your aim is to create uniformity, why wouldn't we pass legislation that creates that uniformity? What would be your position on that? I would like to ask you those two questions.
Senator Miller.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Senator Torres-Ray, thank you for the questions. The answer to your first question is yes. I'm hearing from folks not only in the district that I represent, but throughout the state that are supportive of Senate File 580. To answer your second question, I'm open to having the conversation, and in fact, I'm a co-author on a piece of legislation that would talk about the sick leave. I believe it's Senator Nelson has a bill that provides a tax credit. So I'm a co-author on that bill and certainly open to having the conversation.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow up. Senator, could you speak to us about kind of the local authorities that have talked to you about the benefit to them of having the state regulating their decisions? Could you tell us a little bit about, because obviously what I hear is that local authority is incredibly important, and that's why we have representation in the people who oppose your bill that is significant from those individuals and people who work with these individuals, organizations that lobby on their behalf. Could you tell us a little bit about what is the argument of people at the local level that believe that your legislation, this proposal to impose on them our decision actually is a good idea for them? What?
Senator Miller.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Senator Torres-Ray, thank you for your question. First, I want to start out by mentioning what this bill does not do. Okay, this bill does not regulate wages, benefits, or scheduling at the local level. So a local government can pay their employees or provide any benefits that they want to their employees. So if City ABC wants to pay their employee $12 an hour, they can do that. If they want to pay them $25 an hour, they can do that. Some of the communities that I'm hearing from, they would like to see state labor standards uniform throughout the state. Those are some of the communities that I'm hearing from. But again, this does not take away local control in the way that local governments can pay and provide any benefits that they want to their employees. This bill does not prohibit that. I'll also mention, since this is local government and we're talking about local control, members, I don't feel there's a better way. I don't think you can get any more local than the relationship between an employer and an employee. You can't get any more local than that. And workers or employees have different needs and they have different wants, members. Some may want a higher wage, some may want more PTO, more paid time off, or others may want better insurance benefits. We haven't heard too much about health insurance benefits or dental insurance or retirement plans. So when it comes to wages and benefits, that is best negotiated between the employer and the employee to ensure that the worker's needs or wants are being met.
Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Miller, thank you for bringing this bill forward. And I've been listening carefully to all of the testimony that has come in, and I've jotted some things down as to things that have been said. And some of it's been very troubling. The characterization of current employers. I'm hearing things like anything that is benefiting employees is inconvenient to employers. I heard things about employers forcing sick people to work. I heard things about employers avoiding paying living wages to employees. It makes me wonder what the characterization of employers, especially in some of these cities that have made these actions, actually are. And I'd like to, if someone has an answer to that situation, I would be very interested to hear it, because I need to tell you what issues have happened in my district. I have talked to many of the local businesses, talked to a grocery store that has been a small family-run grocery store for 3 or 4 generations. And they brought up in the discussion, I was there to just learn about their business, meet the folks who ran it. They brought up and said how difficult the state can make it by forcing regulations on them. I am supporting this bill because I am caring for those who are starting out in the workforce. I had businesses explicitly tell me that the regulations that a state or local government would impose on them would cut out the layer of the beginning worker, those that are needing experience, and that directly impacts the young and those that are starting out. I started out as a worker myself, just out of high school, accepted a job willingly at a low wage in order to gain experience, in order to better myself, in order to learn skills that I could build upon moving forward. And I did run into a situation where of multiple employers that I have worked for, I had one that was a very negative experience, where the employer did not treat employees very fairly, and it was a very difficult decision. I made the decision to leave and ended up with the result of months of unemployment as a result. And it is a difficult decision to work through to figure out the next step that you're going to go. But it's a choice that I had the freedom to make locally, and it's the choice of finding an employer that can offer things that are better than others. And one of the issues that I am wrestling with is that how will we distinguish between, I heard from several of the business owners how they talked about the excellent wages and the benefits that they've offered, and I am so glad to hear that, because they've made their business a very attractive place to work, a place where the employees will want to work, will be committed to that cause, and it's taking away their ability to be competitive amongst other employers like the ones that I have dealt with that do not care for and treat their citizens properly. So I'm curious, Senator Miller, are you experiencing a lot of these situations of employers that are these stories like abusing employees like we heard about? And I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward, because it is very much needed to help care for people, especially the small town business owners that are trying to help young people get started in life out in my district.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Matthews, thank you for your question. As a small employer myself, who our company pays competitive wages and excellent benefits to our employees, it's very disappointing and frustrating to hear about businesses that are taking advantage of their employees, and there is a proposal the governor put out, a wage theft proposal that's being discussed. And in my opinion, Senator Matthews, if there are companies or businesses that are being dishonest or mistreating employees, there should be consequences for that.
Senator Wiklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I guess I have a couple questions. Specifically, I have concerns about the bill as well, but I have a couple questions. Specifically, relating to lines 2.5, 6, and 7. First, I have a couple questions for Senate Counsel. Ms. Stengel, I hope that I'm not just putting you in a real difficult spot, but I was wondering if you could tell me if you have a definition, a good definition for some of the terminology in this section. Working conditions specifically. Could you give me, is there a way to, I don't know, kind of give me some parameters for what would be considered a working condition?
Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Senator, Mr. Chair and Senator Wiklund. I don't know that. I think I can look into that and get back to you. It's not something I'm comfortable doing right now, so I can check with some of the other people in my office and we'll get you more information.
Senator Wickland, follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess also if you're doing that, I guess I'd also be interested in what is the particular benefit? Does that have a standard meaning? Is that something that could be easily defined and stated as to what a particular benefit is? Those two, I really...
Senator Wickland, you're looking at .26?
Yes, line 2.6, where it says, provide an employee a particular benefit, and then, or working condition. Term of employment, I guess that seems like a fairly well-defined term, but working condition and particular benefit, I guess I feel like are pretty open-ended terms. And I guess what concerns me about those is that we have experience with localities deciding that conditions, specific conditions that they would like to see in their locality go beyond what we've decided to regulate as a state. And working condition, I guess to Senator Miller, I'd like to find out, do you think that the words working condition would apply to smoke-free ordinances that we've implemented in this state?
Senator Miller?
Senator Hall, Senator Wickland, no. That's a statewide, so that's a state standard, the smoking conditions.
Well, Senator Hall, Chair Hall, Senator Miller, I mean, that's true for some aspects of the smoke-free, the Clean Air Act. But as you know, a few years ago, we tried to implement statewide provisions that had to do with e-cigarettes, and we implemented some of them. We have implemented some regulation of e-cigarettes in public places and in some settings, but it does not correspond exactly to what the state Clean Air Act says for regular cigarettes. And in fact, many localities, after we were unsuccessful in passing the statewide regulation, went ahead and they chose to implement greater restrictions in their communities. In fact, in your community, in your area, I think there's such a case in my area in Hennepin County in Bloomington. They chose to implement greater restrictions on e-cigarettes and implement it in other settings, restaurants. So I guess it concerns me that this bill has statements like may not adopt this type of separation of a state or addition to a state regulation in other settings. It prevents localities from doing that. Would you have any comments on that, Senator Miller?
Senator Miller?
Senator Hall, Chair Hall, and Senator Wickland, the language of the bill is very narrow to labor standards related to wages, benefits, and scheduling, along with working conditions.
Chair Hall, Senator Miller, I guess I don't see that this clause D, when it applies to working conditions, if there were localities that were still looking at implementing e-cigarette restrictions to make their localities conform more broadly to a smoke-free environment, it seems to me that this language could prevent them from doing that.
Senator Osmick, to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that point, Senator Wickland, I think you're confusing two issues here. The physical plant of a facility actually resides within a jurisdiction where they would be able to have that level of local control. What's happening here with Minneapolis and St. Paul is they're trying to take their ordinances and impose it upon other local jurisdictions beyond their borders. I don't see how your commentary and direction on this is actually analogous to the actual bill itself.
And Mr.
Chair,
Miller. Senator Wickland, an employer can also enforce that in say it's a plant. Maybe it's a health and safety condition. The employer, this bill doesn't prevent anything from the employer to making that decision about working conditions within their plant.
Chair Pauls, Chair
Senator
Hall.
Wickland?
Senator Miller, I guess what I can tell from communities who have passed local regulations extending the Clean Air Act to include e-cigarettes is that they felt in their communities that it was important for businesses to also be a part of that. Working conditions extends to people who go into restaurants or have to work in restaurants, or they may work in many different environments, and they may be exposed to e-cigarettes if the locality determines that they don't want to pass this. And many localities have decided that that is something that they'd like to see their resident or their community benefit from. So I really think that Clause D is extremely broad. I think that it will have a negative impact on communities determining for themselves, what are local concerns for their community that they want to work on together. Members of the community that want to work on a local public health concern, maybe they want to encourage employers to provide, as a working condition, access to transit or access to bike racks, to encourage healthier behaviors. I can see local governments wanting to work with their employers on that, but maybe they do want to pass a local policy requiring some of these things, and this bill will prevent them from doing that.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Hall and Senator Wickland. I want to be very clear that this language, there's nothing in this language that prohibits a community from having conversations with their employers and encouraging them to do anything, requiring them to do something. If it's related to wages, benefits, or scheduling would be affected by this bill, but encouraging them to do something would not be affected by the language in Senate File 580.
Senator Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, just for the record, I'm one of the small businesses that people have been trying to paint into this picture of they used to call them money-grabbing moguls, who are trying to, at the expense of their employees, extract every penny from their business for their own personal benefit. I don't think that Mr. Conry would identify with that type of business. And in fact, he indicated that he had already provided benefits to his employees, as I did when I had my business. So I guess my question is this. As a small business owner, I worked and had employees that worked in multiple jurisdictions. And I feel that it seems beyond the reach of a local government, which is what we're talking about, to affect, for example, a company in my district, Speedy Delivery, which is a very successful small business delivery who competes with the likes of FedEx, UPS, and some of the other national companies. Speedy delivers into the city of Minneapolis, but is based in St. Cloud. And it seems to me that for Minneapolis to regulate Speedy Delivery, who does not live there, does not pay taxes there, to force that company into a regulation that is different, that means an employee of Speedy Delivery, the same employee, will be treated differently in different locations. So I guess my question is, as a matter of local government policy, is it not true that local governments are governed by their statutory or charter provisions, and that only those provisions are things that they can enforce? And is it not the province of the state to then govern those provisions? And is that not what this bill seeks to do?
Senator Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ralph, yeah, so you're correct. This bill, if passed, or this bill is seeking to have fair and consistent labor standards throughout the state related to wages, benefits, and scheduling. And as a small business owner myself, and you mentioned that you are one or were one, we heard in the Senate Jobs Committee members from, we had a small and mid-sized business day in the Senate Jobs Committee. We had a Fortune 500 day where we heard from representatives of 3 of our largest companies. And what was interesting and contradictory to some of the testimony of a corporate power grab is many of our larger businesses are already offering benefits and competitive wages, competitive benefits. They're working with their employees to make sure that they're meeting the needs and wants of those employees. And another interesting thing that was mentioned in the Jobs Committee was the larger corporations have departments that can handle this. They can filter through. If Minnesota has 853 cities and 87 counties. We heard about the patchwork of inconsistent labor standards from one city to city or county to county or cities and counties. So it could get very complicated. The larger companies have the departments to manage that. Members, it's the small businesses that don't. They said, the large companies said, yeah, this will cost them more, but they have the people and the resources to handle that. But we heard from small and mid-sized businesses that this would affect their businesses. This would affect their workers if we don't have fair and uniform labor standards that are consistent throughout the state. So this isn't a power grab by big corporations, members. This is something that we're hearing from our small businesses in communities throughout the state and how this would negatively affect them and the opportunities that they can provide to their workers and their communities if we have even a small percentage of 853 cities or 87 counties were to implement different labor standards throughout the state. So this bill in front of us is incredibly important for our small and mid-sized businesses in the state of Minnesota.
So, members, we have just a few more minutes.
Just one follow-up then?
If it could be really quick, and then we'll have a couple more members, and that'll be it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, nothing in this bill prohibits a private employer from offering benefits over and above the minimums that are set in the state, such as minimum wage, family leave, hours. Nothing prohibits that employer from offering those and gives that employer the opportunity to compete in the workplace by offering those higher wages and benefits. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ralph, you're absolutely correct, and there's nothing in this language that prohibits a local government from paying their employees or providing benefits above and beyond the state's minimum standards.
Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the temptation to continue to talk about business, of course, because this is an important core part of this legislation. But if you allow me, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask elected official who is here, Ms. Glidden, to join us, if you could, Councilmember Glidden. There is this notion, Ms. Glidden, that ultimately small businesses have a problem, and that we need to take care of it. That sick leave and higher wages are complicated for small businesses. What I hear in the city is that you are competing with, Boston, who just has, the $15 minimum wage and sick leave, Washington, Seattle, and that millennials are really looking to move to cities where we have competitive wages and competitive, an environment where, their families can thrive, where they can find employment, where they can pay for housing. That's what I hear in terms of research. Is that your understanding? My understanding is that you, as an elected official at the local level, really need to take that into consideration. Do you hear that business are really so concerned that small businesses are going to leave the city of Minneapolis because of the decisions that you've made. Could you tell us about the impact of these decisions in Minneapolis? Because what I hear is the opposite, that Minneapolis is thriving. People want to do business in Minneapolis because of the decisions you're making. Could you illustrate and talk about it?
So maybe I'll just make a few comments about our process and information that we looked at. We did have a lot of engagement with small business as well as medium and larger sized businesses. We had that through a series of forums. We had that through comments that were made to us. We had that through a committee that met for several months that included small business owners, that included some business associations, and also included some workers and labor representatives. So it was a group with multiple perspectives. And to be honest, we heard a lot of support for this benefit, including, not unanimously, but including from the business community, that this was important, that this was something that was of value. And then again, I will say this is something where a lot of businesses do provide it, about 60%, but then you have a significant portion that do not, which is about the 40%. So we did a lot of process to try to listen to all the voices. The other thing we did is we looked at research around the country. We looked at experiences of other cities and other states, including reports that had been done on whether there was movement of businesses outside a city that had enacted these kinds of regulations, and we did not find that there was evidence that that had happened in other communities that had adopted sick leave, which there are many, many cities across the nation that have adopted a sick leave ordinance.
Thank you. I understand we have a committee after us, and we're trying to get this done with.
Mr. Chair, I would like to request, I forgot to say that I would like to request a roll call in this.
Sure. A roll call has been requested.
Thank you.
Senator Uyghur.
Do I have 10 seconds or?
We'll give you 20.
Oh, okay. Mr. Chair and members, it's not a question, it's more my position. I've heard good arguments on the patchwork, and there's a lot of great businesses in my own district, and they've commented. They're very active, and I've heard very strongly from local officials, including White Bear Lake, the incoming president, or soon-to-be, for the League of Cities. Why would we usurp local control? They have a process. And so I think that's a very compelling argument on itself for the local control. And, they also have an election certificate, and the democracy works there. But what really concerns me is there's 150,000 people or more probably living on the edge, check to check. A sick child or a missed payment could be disaster. And they're counting on this, and we're going retroactive. And that's not Minnesotan. And this is not in touch with America. You look at the majority of states, all around us except Wisconsin, they don't have this. It's not in Washington, California. It's not in Texas. I could go through. The majority of states don't have this. I'm voting no.
Senator Lane.
In consideration of the time, I'll just cut to my last point, which is this, similar to what Senator Uyghur was talking about. It's the disparities that we find in our society, and this is one of the ways in which we can address the disparities. And the disparities have to do with the people who have the lesser income and who have the jobs that don't have these benefits. We need to take care of those situations because they all involve, almost all, except maybe if you're a youth working at McDonald's or something, they all involve children. And children, we talk about Minnesota having the greatest achievement gap, and we address that regarding disparities in their rearing, in their prenatal and first 3 years of life, when the parents can't be there for them because they can't even take off time work to take care of their sick child. They bring them to daycare sick. The daycare doesn't want them because it will pass to other children. It either does pass to other children or they have to find someplace else to put their kids. If they don't, they lose their job. If they lose their job, how do they provide for their children? It's this endless cycle in which the children are in a very stressful situation that we wonder why Minnesota has such disparities in learning.
Senator Jasinski, if you could keep it short, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I will keep it short. But I would like to move this on. I was a mayor for 8 years in Faribault, and we, at the time the non-smoking legislation came through, and we as a local government wanted the state to take control because we didn't want to have a hodgepodge through the state and having one city compete against another. So I believe the local control is good in certain things, but in this instance, I do not. I want to thank Senator Miller for bringing this forward. I think this is a good bill. It lets the market take control. And with that, I would move Senate File 580 be recommended to pass to the Senate floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What's that? Yeah. We'll do a roll call, but Senator Jasinski has moved Senate File 580 to be recommended to pass and sent to the floor. A roll call will be taken.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Jasinski.
Yes.
Lane. Matthews.
Yes.
Osmic.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes.
Torres Ray.
No.
Uyghur. Wickland.
With a vote, 6 yeses and 4 noes, the motion passes.